a commission named Taylor Bouchard. And the conclusion of that commission is that the multiculturalism system in Canada doesn't fit with Quebec, because we think that we have to integrate the immigrants, respecting them because they're modifying our society, and it's a plus. My grandfather was a home child. My mother's name Rolly, so I don't have any problem. When I go to Canada, a lot of times I say I'm a bloke who turned black. So I don't have anything against immigration. But the multiculturalism doesn't fit with Quebec. We're only 2% of Francophones within North America, largely Hispanophone and Anglophone. We have to integrate the immigrants and build a society where a Quebecer is a Quebecer is a Quebecer without any exception.
Mr. Layton.
Well, thank you for the question, and I believe that we are going to have, Jade, continued waves of immigration here in Canada. We don't reproduce our own population sufficiently rapidly for us to grow our economy, and so we're going to be attracting people. And besides, who wouldn't want to come and live in this beautiful country of ours? I'm lucky enough to be in a family that came here from Hong Kong, and I got to marry Olivia as a result of that. Thank goodness we had the kind of policies that encouraged families to come here to Canada. One of the most disturbing aspects of what the Harper government is doing is that they're encouraging more and more people to come here as temporary foreign workers. They come here alone, they're not allowed to bring their family, and they work for up to 3 years for some company, and they send the money back home and then they go back home. And that's not how we built this country. I say family reunification is the key thing. And we now have families who have been applying to come here to bring their mother over to Canada, sometimes waiting 10, 12, 13 years. And they are unable to come here. There are cases where grandparents pass away before they can come and hold their grandchild. That is wrong. We need to put resources into encouraging those folks to be able to come here and be part of their family. And that would be a strong priority for a New Democrat government.
Well, one thing I should say, Mr. Layton, that I just can't accept is the will of that government to create two categories of refugees. We can't accept that. People coming here are coming because they have a lot of difficulties, political difficulties or economic difficulties in their countries. Sometimes it's a question of to stay alive or to die. And I saw those scandalous ads made by the Tories, a ship coming in Canada. It made me remember those boat people. They came in that kind of ships. And those people were fleeing from Vietnam and Cambodia. And now they're good Quebec citizens. This is a plus to the Quebec society. But when I see those kind of ads identifying those people like criminals, there's no other words for that. I just can't accept that. And I think that we have to oppose that. And if he's got a majority, then we'll have that kind of policy. Two categories of refugees.
I believe that we will find, if Mr. Harper hopefully won't have power after the next election, because I've seen these policies develop over the last number of years, and what we're seeing is more and more of this focus on the immigrant as some kind of an economic unit, so that we can squeeze as much out as we can. We don't give them the professional certification. They end up coming here. They're brought here with the inducement that perhaps with their professional credentials, training as doctors and professionals of all kinds, that perhaps they'd be able to find that kind of work here. And they come here and the door is slammed in their face. And New Democrats have been pushing hard for measures to be taken. And one of the most important measures is to create an opportunity for one of those well-trained workers to work in a mentorship context with some Canadian worker and professional who's already working in that area, so that they can get that Canadian experience. And that's got to be one of the top priorities. And by the way, that would also make sure that we would have a lot more doctors and medical professionals very quickly available to the 5 million Canadians that don't have medical care right now from a family doctor.
Mr. Layton, since you recognize that Quebec is a nation, then I ask you, will you then give Quebec full power over immigration, and also the right to have its own policy concerning integration of the immigrants? Since the Bouchard-Taylor Commission was very clear, multiculturalism doesn't fit with Quebec's interest and Quebec's future. Would you agree that Quebec should have the right to determine its own policy and have full power over immigration,
well,
since we're a nation.
Of course, Quebec right now has very extensive control over its own immigration, and that's important because if we talk about Quebec, I was born and raised in Quebec, and here is a wonderful part of our country where the French language is the language of work, and it's the language of culture.
Not everywhere, you know that.
No, well, and that's why the NDP put forward legislation so that could happen.
So you would agree that Bill 101 applied to all workers in Quebec?
And we have
Bill
proposed,
101 applied to all workers.
And we have proposed that in the House for all federally regulated.
So Bill 101.
Thomas Mulcair, yes, has made exactly that proposal.
But I want to hear you. Do you agree that Bill 101 should apply to all economic sectors in Quebec?
Well, and we're taking action on precisely that,
so
Mr.
you're proposing that Bill 101 will apply?
We have said that those that kind of framework should apply, for example, to workers in
I'm not talking about that kind of framework.
Industries.
I'm talking very precisely about Bill 101. Should it apply to all economic sectors? Because it doesn't apply to telecommunication, transportation, and the banks.
Mr. Giuseppe, you know that we have put legislation before the House of Commons to do exactly what you've asked.
No.
Yes, it does.
No.
Yes, it does.
Gentlemen, if I may, let me jump in here.
We've got to rule that.
That's the 6 minutes for the one-on-one.
That way we can preserve the French language in Quebec, which is very, very important.
Okay, we broadened it out to all four leaders now. Mr. Ignatieff, then Mr. Harper.
I want to get back to Jade's very important question. My dad came to Canada as an immigrant from Russia, and they arrived in Quebec. And the key, I think, to successful integration is mastery of the language. It's absolutely key that newcomers to our country, ils ont la maîtrise de la langue, Monsieur Duceppe. Je crois que ça, c'est le clé. That's the key, language integration. Well, one of the problems we've got here is that this government, the Harper government, has cut settlement funding, cut language instruction. The key to taking newcomers and making them good citizens, sharing our values, is giving them the mastery of the language. In Quebec, it's going to be the French language. In other parts of the country, it's going to be the other official language. And this government has cut settlement funding. So we've broken up the process by which we take newcomers and turn them into proud citizens. And the key to the future of a multicultural society, to get to Jade's point, is equality of rights, equality of opportunity under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. If we stick to those principles, will continue to be a model and example to the world.
Mr. Harper.
Well, I should just respond briefly to Mr. Ignatieff's assertion. Of course, this government has tripled settlement funding with a higher emphasis on language because it is so important. But let me just answer the original question, which was on multiculturalism, because I think it's important. We favor multiculturalism, and what Canadians need to understand, what we understand about multiculturalism, is that people who make the hard decision to leave countries where they've been established for centuries or millennia and come here, they first and foremost want to belong to this country. That's why they come. That's why they're here. They also, at the same time, will change our country. And we show through multiculturalism our willingness to accommodate their differences, but so they're more comfortable. That's why we're so successful integrating people as a country. I think we're probably the most successful country in the world in that regard. Now, one issue that was raised was foreign credentials. In our budget is an important measure to give loans to new Canadians so they can get their foreign credentials when they simply can't afford to take a course. That's something Parliament should have been doing instead of having this unnecessary election.
Jack Layton.
Well, first of all, that was a completely inadequate program, but maybe this debate will produce a much better one coming out of it. But why did you cut the immigrant settlement services? These are services that helped immigrants who arrived here to make their way and had, in some cases, many decades of a record of service, very effective service here in Canada. And yet your government came in and essentially created a situation where immigrants arrive and they just haven't got the support to do what you've rather piously said you think ought to be happening.
Well, Mr. Layton, that's simply not true. Settlement funding support has tripled under this government. And we've also maintained, we're the first government to maintain a vigorous and strong and open-door immigration policy during a recession, because we're focused on the long-term interests of Canada and the Canadian economy.
Why so many temporary foreign workers,
simply are not true. Well, look, the reason for that is
we've got more of them coming in than immigrants now.
We have people coming who have jobs waiting for them. They almost invariably settle here. You know, The NDP government in Manitoba wants us to bring people specifically to fill jobs. That's why we're making some of this reorientation of the program, to make sure immigrants have work. It helps them adjust. It helps them become productive. It benefits everybody.
Mr.
I don't know why
Ignatieff.
anyone would be against that, and even your
Michael
NDP
Ignatieff's
colleagues
turn.
are not against it.
My dad came here with his mom and his brothers. He came here as a family class immigrant. I sometimes worry, and if you'd been in power then, I don't think he would have got in. I mean, we got to get the balance back. Family class immigration is crucial because families look after each other and stick to each other and help each other to succeed. If you put too much emphasis on temporary foreign workers, we'll get the balance right. Integration will be more difficult. I mean, and then we back up family reunification visas, so you got Canadian citizens saying, I can't get my mom and dad over here. And that's what you've been doing. You've been reducing family reunification, and that's creating basically deep unfairness and deep resentment on all the new Canadians that I meet.
Mr. Ignatieff, I know that you and the NDP have been saying that, but that's simply not true. We've been increasing categories across the board. In terms of family class, there will be as many family class admitted this year as in the previous year. That's the government's plan. That's how we keep a strong system of immigration. I know that you think you could score some points making these kinds of arguments, but they're simply not true. And we will continue to make sure we have a strong policy that accepts immigrants for a wide variety of reasons, but particularly ensures that they're able to contribute all they can contribute to our economy and be as successful as they can be.
I think it is very clear, and since it was recognized that Quebec is a nation, and we're only 2%, I repeat, in North America, that people coming to Quebec has to integrate themselves with in French, which is the public common language. So I just don't understand why you oppose, Mr. Harper and Mr. Ignatieff, that Bill 101, the French language, be the language of work for the economic sectors relying on the federal code, labor code, which are the banks, telecommunication, transportation, all those three sectors, 300,000 people, a lot of women among them. I just don't understand why it doesn't. We don't need a constitutional amendment to do so.
Well, just Mr. Duceppe, I can answer the question. We have, as we've said as a government many times, we respect the division of powers in our federal constitution. It gives the federal government some powers over the labor area, gives the Quebec government other powers over the labor area. We have important constitutional responsibilities to the two national languages of this country, and in our area of jurisdiction, we respect that. We don't interfere with Quebec's jurisdiction over Bill 101. But let me just also question what you keep saying, that somehow multiculturalism is incompatible with being a Quebecer. You know, there's lots of people in this country who speak English who don't come from an English or a British background. One can retain their culture and their cultural identity and still integrate into the mainstream language of the community, which is French in Quebec and English in most of the rest of the country. And that's what we do, and that's why we support these policies.
Yes, but what we're saying on that, we had a commission working on that, and it's not because we don't want those people to enrich our culture. Obviously, we want that, but we don't want to create ghettos. And you think when you're coming in Quebec, you have to integrate to the Quebec society. And the model of multiculturalism is in bankruptcy in Great Britain, as an example, and it is contested in a lot of places. That doesn't mean that you don't want the immigrants to come and to bring their own values and part of their culture. But you have to
reply here. Gentlemen, quick reply here, then the other two.
Creating ghettos. It is the most successful integration policy in the world. It helps Canadians retain their culture while being part of the broader community. That's what we're so proud of. I know the Bloc Québécois wants to break up the country, and you don't think new Canadians are going to support that objective. That's fine.
No, but this is not the case at all. Gentlemen,
this is
not the case at all.
Mr. Layton, please. Jack Layton's turn, please.
Well, I have to come back to the issue that's on the minds of most of the families that we're talking about here, which is how they can bring their family members to join them here. And how can we regard it as somehow acceptable that a family has to wait for 10 years for their mother or father to come and join them? I mean, that is just so wrong. I think of Olivia's mother, who lives with us, has lived with us for 20 years. Thank goodness she wasn't applying to come here now. because she might never have got to see my granddaughter. That's just simply wrong. And it's tearing families apart. Why don't we make a commitment, all of the parties together, to say that that's going to get fixed, and we're going to make sure that every family member that wants to be here as part of a loving family and building this country through that kind of love and community building, that